Hello, I'm your host, Vicky Saputo, and my guests, Linda Bloom, licensed clinical social worker who has her master's in social work, and Charlie Bloom, who also has his master's in social work, are psychotherapists. They're authors, seminar leaders, and international consultants considered experts in the field of human relations. They've been faculty members and educators at a number of universities and learning institutes, and their work has been endorsed by many nationally recognized speakers and educators. Their book, 101 Things I Wish I Knew When I Got Married, is currently in its 18th printing, having sold almost 100,000 copies, and published in 2010 is Secrets of a Great Marriage. Linda and Charlie are already finishing their third book. It's so nice to have both of you on the show. Thank you.
I'm delighted to be here.
Great to be here.
I just love your books. They are so easy to read. Anybody could read them, I think, and you can read them from the beginning or in the middle or pick any chapter, and they're so, so helpful. One of the things that you talk about in your books is about how to be vulnerable and how this is important. And so I'm noticing how you're vulnerable in the books and sharing your own personal experiences. So how is it helpful for people to expose their vulnerabilities to their partners?
I think vulnerability, Vicky, is totally natural for us. And the real question for me is, how can we not be? And the answer, of course, is that we learn not to be. We learn to protect ourselves by cultivating an image and being careful about what we present in order to impress people in a certain favorable way.
Well, I think many times aren't people afraid of rejection or emotional blackmail if they are real vulnerable to their partner?
Yeah, I think that that's one of the biggest fears that human beings have, because rejection and judgment can feel like it's something that's devastating to our ego. And one of the things that we try to do in our work is help people to distinguish their true self from the social self or the ego that we create. And as we become more grounded in our authenticity, it becomes less important to protect ourselves. And it's not that the ego doesn't come up for us, it's just that it becomes less dominant in our experience.
And so you agree with this?
Well, vulnerability is the way to get close to other people. And if you just send your image to each other, there's going to be distance, and the way in which we know each other is not going to have the kind of depth.
So in other words, showing who we really are.
Yes.
Not holding
with
back
our
on
flaws, with our mistakes, and with our magnificence. You know, people tend to cover up their golden self too. So really to choose some people, handpick them, and to practice being vulnerable with them and feeling exposed and embarrassed sometime and a little out there on the shaky branches. But that's how people get close, because when people say that they care for you and then people say they love you, you're not haunted by the if they only knew this about me. You could really let yourself be nourished by their love.
So when you're talking about being loved, I know in your book you talk about how people tend to love the way they want to be loved themselves. So tell me a little bit about this Thich Nhat Hanh.
Well, I went to do a meditation retreat at Mount Madonna Center with Thich Nhat Hanh, and what I thought that I was going to was to learn meditation techniques. And he talked about relationship in every Dharma talk that he gave. And what stands out from the week, and there were many beautiful moments, was when he said how important it is to sit with those that are beloved and to ask them from the bottom of our heart, how may I best love you? And it touched me so deeply that it became a teaching that we bring to all of our classes. Not to assume that we know how the other person wants to be loved, because we can't help but be subjective. We tend to want to love them the way we like to be loved, so we'll touch them a lot if we like to be touched. Or
And maybe it bothers them.
yeah, maybe that's not their favorite way. And so we have people who've been together for decades in our workshop sometimes. They've never, ever asked. And sometimes they're surprised to find out that he or she wants the words.
I remember learning a little bit of this in a NLP, neuro-linguistic programming workshop, and we did some exercises on that. And too, they talked about how some people are more kinesthetic and some are more, auditory and visual and that kind of thing. So, like, one person might want to have flowers, and another person doesn't care about the flowers. They just want you to tell them that you love them and that kind of thing. So that I think is a good tip that you had in your book. When tragedy hits, many times relationships can either pull apart or they can get more solid. And I'm really sorry for your loss of your son. From what I've heard from everybody, that can be the worst loss of anything. Mm-hmm. The worst loss that there is. So how did you get through this process together and spiritually connect to help yourselves to get through it?
Yeah, well, you're right, Vicky. It's every parent's worst nightmare, and we had the misfortunate experience of experiencing that, and it's true that one of the things that you find out at a time that you're really tested, and the loss of a child, the loss of anybody who's close, but particularly a child, really is going to test the quality of your connection with each other. And there's a very high percentage of couples who don't make it through the first year after the loss of a child because both parents are bereaved at the same time. They're basically emotionally bankrupt. And so where we're used to turning to each other when one of us needs support, when neither one of us has anything to give,
you both need it. Yeah.
You both need it. You both need it. And if you haven't found some place, some kind of a spiritual connection, some place within yourself to sustain you when you're at a place where you can't be really nourished by the person that you generally turn towards, then it puts such a great stress on the relationship that it becomes intolerable. And so it's a time when you really, we tell people all the time, don't wait until you're in a crisis to do this work, because it may be too late at that point. If you haven't been practicing, if you haven't been exercising those muscles, those spiritual muscles, those emotional muscles, where you're finding a connection with a source other than yourself, outside of yourself, a spiritual connection, then when you are tested in that way, it's going to be very difficult because you can't just learn that overnight.
So it's really important to have some preparation. What would you give, Linda, as advice for other people that would have to go through something like this?
I would say that it's really important to build yourself up into the strongest person that you can evolve into, and to build your relationships, plural, not just with your partner, but with your kids, with family members, with friends, because we were both devastated, of course, at the same time. We didn't have that much to be able to give to each other and to have other people to be able to turn to. And we had some lovely people in our life who were there for us in a very important way.
I think this is really helpful for people to know this, because many times people want to do something to help and they don't know what to do. No. And some people, because they don't know what to do, they don't do anything.
And they're frightened by it. They're frightened of making it worse. They're frightened of saying the wrong thing. And being there with your caring, listening, is incredible support. You don't have to say anything brilliant and profound, and you can't take the person's pain away. You can just dilute it a little bit with your caring witnessing of their grief. And when we, felt like there was a little bit more there, where we weren't so completely empty, we took turns being there for the other person. Mm-hmm. We didn't really accomplish very many results that first year. You know, we were just too devastated. So you have to totally readjust your idea of what your life is going to look like, because so much of your energy is eaten up by the grief at that time. Mm-hmm. So lowering your expectations down to a reasonable amount, and you just give what you can.
Well, thank you for sharing that, because I know that's a really personal story, and it's very painful. It's painful even to listen to. Mm-hmm. So many times in our marital relationships, we've got lots of challenges. And I liked what you say in your books about how it brings opportunity for growth.
More than the mind thinks we should have to have. Because, you know, we're drawn to people who are very different than we are. And I think some deep part of us knows that there's going to be a vitality in the relationship to pair up with somebody who's different than we are. Something that's deeper than our minds knowing, some deep in the soul knowing, gravitates us towards somebody who's quite different. And then those same things that were so enchanting and compelling in the beginning start to drive us nuts. And if we can open to that, if we can be spacious about it, we can deal with the challenges that come up, the differences, in a respectful way. They don't have to burn us up.
But one of the things that you both say in your book is that conflicts are optional. How are conflicts optional?
Well, one of the things that we say is that differences are inevitable, but conflict is optional. And what we mean by that is that, like Linda said, we wouldn't even be attracted to somebody who's just like us. We're going to be attracted to people who are strong in areas that we're not so strong, who complement our personalities in certain ways. A person who's introverted is probably going to be more likely to be attracted to somebody who's a little bit more outgoing, just because it kind of rounds us off to be in relationship with somebody.
And then it's
like
not
that.
Boring.
It's definitely not boring. I mean, sometimes you kind of wish that it was a little bit more boring. But differences are inevitable. Conflict comes up when we take differences and we try to convert the other person to our view. We use manipulation or coercion or some kind of intimidation or force, or we use some strategy, some tactic to get them to agree with us, because
we've used them all.
Yeah, we're pretty good at it.
And then you report on them.
Exactly. And so it's inevitable that there are going to be differences. If we learn how to work with the differences in ways, and not simply to learn to appreciate them or learn to avoid getting into fights, but actually see how the differences are valuable, that they can enrich and enhance the relationship.
Is this what you call conscious conflict?
That's what we call conscious conflict, exactly. So you're dealing with the differences, but you're doing it in a way that isn't designed to put the other person down or to punish the other person, but it's designed to support you in getting clear about what it is that there is for you to learn from this situation, because there's always something to learn.
Well, that's really good if you can do that when your button's been pushed or your...
Yeah. This is much easier.
Spiritual practice.
Much easier said than done. We're not claiming that this is easy, but with practice you can learn how to diffuse some of those reactive patterns.
So what's the diamond in the dirt?
Well, when you can dive down to a deeper level, to that vulnerable level, below the anger and the irritation and the rage and the resentment, and you go down, there's always pain or fear or both. And this is where the personal disarmament takes place. If you can catch yourself red-handed and say, oh, I'm really plugged in right now, oh, my buttons are pushed, there must be something here for me to look at. And if you can go to those vulnerable layers and begin connecting with the other person, well, this is really reminding me of something painful in my past. Or I am so scared right now that you just want to get your way and you don't care about my needs. Do you see? You can speak about it at a deeper level, and when people connect